As long as I don't have too dumb a look on my face. Hey, here we are. We're live. Am I still frozen or am I live?
You are frozen, but I hear you, so you must be live.
Oh, geez. That sucks. Okay, well, as long as you hear me, I'll try to continue this way for a while. So welcome, Jay. Can you tell us a little bit about your background? I was going to show a photo of you, and it's like you're way up in the sky on a snowboard.
Oh my God, you found one of those?
Yeah, I found one.
Those are pre-internet. They shouldn't even be on the internet. That was like the late 90s or something.
I got it off your LinkedIn profile, so.
Oh, right. Oh, God. Way down at the bottom.
I'm a pretty good internet sleuth. So, so that was pretty amazing. But I'm a good internet sleuth, but I couldn't figure out much about your motorcycling background. So when we started chatting about 15 minutes ago, you were on your porch, and then when you heard I was going to ask about that, you headed to the garage. And look at that.
Yeah.
Show us around.
Yeah. Well, I guess I have a background in taking stupid risks, and that would probably be my number one skill set in life. You know, from skateboarding to professional freestyle snowboarding in the late 90s and early 2000s, which explains those photos at the bottom of my LinkedIn, I guess, to motorcycling all during those years. I've been riding motorbikes since I was 19, so 25 years, which is a really long time by the sounds of it, quarter century of motorcycling. And I guess that could quite elegantly lead into the fact that in those 25 years, I've scarcely seen any aspect of evolution of motorcycles. And while I suppose that didn't bother me for a long time, it bothers me now. So that's led to the foundation of Damon.
Yeah, so it's quite a story on how you got started with Damon. Am I still frozen? That camera's frozen? That's
no,
crazy.
Now you're coming and going. Yeah, you're frozen again.
When I went back to my laptop, I was good. So maybe we just have to go with the laptop. That's crazy. Start video. Sorry, everyone, for the technical problems. So if that's the case, I'm going to move my laptop closer to me.
There you go. You're live.
Awesome.
We're live,
all right.
Both of us.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So did you grow up in British Columbia?
Yeah, North Vancouver. I'm sitting in North Van looking at 1, 2, 3 ski hills, about a 20-minute bus ride away from my high school. So I could skip out during lunch hour and be home by 4 p.m. And my mom didn't even know I just got 10, 12 runs in that day. It was awesome.
All on a snowboard?
Great afternoons. Yep.
Mostly snowboarding?
Snowboarding from 89 to, well, I started snowboarding in 89. So by 95, 96, I moved to Whistler to pursue my dream to be a competitive snowboarder.
Yeah, you were a pro for a while, right?
Yeah. Competing in half pipe, big air, slope style, and border cross in BC, Canada, and world competitions.
Yeah, that's really cool. And before that, you lived a normal Canadian North Vancouver upbringing?
Yeah, pretty much.
Ride motorcycles back then?
No, not until I was 19. I always wanted to. I was big into the TV show Chips, Battlestar Galactica, anything with a motorbike in it. Watching Evel Knievel. These are really old motorcycle icons, aren't they?
Yeah. But great ones. And ones. So then you got a bug to go into starting companies.
Mm-hmm.
And you started one that had to do with powering electric trucks.
Yeah, kind of. Well, I mean,
Explain that.
I was always running my own business at one time or another from the age of like 10. And then at 17, I dropped out of high school in grade 11 because I wasn't really learning anything among all the students, just dicking around, not doing anything serious. So I thought I could put my time to better use. And I went and got 3 jobs and worked full time and put myself through night school to graduate. And then when I was 19, they gave me the keys to run a couple of coffee shops and I started selling franchises. I sold a couple of coffee shop franchises. And then when I was 20, I realized this was not my plan. My plan was to compete in freestyle snowboarding. So I quit everything and went off to do that. And then at 20, during those years in the off seasons, I had some action sports promotions companies. I managed some team athletic teams of some of my sponsors, and then built a women's clothing company in the snowboard market, which was a failure, lost my money. And then sold motorbikes for a few years, became a sales manager of a Honda dealership. And then I started then I sold Harleys for 4 months and I was terrible at selling Harleys.
Oh, really?
I was killing it selling Hondas and absolutely horrible selling Harleys.
Why was that?
Yeah, I don't know. Can't figure it out. Yeah. And then I started, and then I decided that I needed to help the world get off oil, and that would be a good life purpose. It's a long story. And started Rev Technologies, building electric SUVs and pickups. That's when my tech career started.
Yeah.
29,
cool.
30 years old. Yeah.
So looking at what's behind you there, I'm starting to drool a little bit, and I forgot to ask you about that. So I see a lot of things back there. I see 2 motorcycles. How many are there?
Yeah, there's 2. There's my Aprilia RSV, which was on the track last weekend, and my girlfriend's Honda CBR 1000.
Oh yeah.
These are really our street bikes, and then she has a race bike at Damon at the office. Yeah.
Yeah, very cool. And what else you got back there? It looks like you're got some
The
Canadian stuff, like a canoe paddle.
Oh yeah, it's a paddle board, and
paddleboard, yeah.
And a barbell set. What
Yeah.
do you call those things? A rig, and some snowboards for the kids, some mountain bikes because we live on the North Shore. Lots of good mountain biking here. Exceptional mountain biking here, which we never get to do.
Yeah.
And I hope my kids don't watch this video, but I'm heavily researching finding some electric motorcycles for them, but they're all dirt bikes and trial bikes. And I want to put street tires and give them a street experience, but they're all dirt bike style setup.
I see.
If you want to get a kid's electric bike, it's got to be a dirt bike, it seems.
Yeah.
So I'm hunting down some of those.
Yeah, very cool. So Rapid Electronic Vehicles, you started that around 2008?
Yep.
So you don't have an engineering background or science background or anything like that.
Right.
So you get into rapid electric vehicles, and you're making, in fact, I have photos of you from back then too, because you put them up on LinkedIn.
Oh God.
And oh God, yeah.
Marketing myself too well.
They actually look pretty good. So I think we really, with the other camera, I know I could show this really well. Let's see how well I can do it here.
Oh, that is July 2001, July 2000. That's a hot summer day. It's like 85, 90 degrees. That's Mount Hood, Oregon in July.
Yeah.
So
wow.
cool. Just amazing up there.
You were way up there.
Yeah.
So you ended your career as a snowboarder. You failed at a women's clothing company. You couldn't sell Harleys, but you did really well selling Hondas. And here you are. Explain this photo.
Yeah, that's what's in there. So I'm holding a level 2 charger, which around the time that picture was taken for BC Business Magazine, what the level 2 charger, 2009, 2010, nobody had any idea what those were. We were the national distributor for ChargePoint at the time. So we were putting out charging stations around BC, Alberta, trying to get them installed. And that vehicle behind me is an electric SUV, or electric pickup truck, an F-150. SAIC, which is the big military contractor in the US, was one of our 2 partners. Honeywell Aerospace was the other. And together we were winning military bids to electrify military bases. So the SUVs and the pickups, civilian fleet vehicles, are driven by the colonels and the generals on the base to run around from one end of the base to the other. But the vehicle had a unique technology to not only take energy from the grid or from the military microgrid in their case, but feed the energy back into the grid whenever it was more opportune to do so, or if there was a natural disaster or an attack. A lot of military bases run on their own islanded microgrids powered by giant diesel generators, meaning they're burning diesel 24 hours a day. And obviously that's not good. And in the words of the military, if you save oil, you save lives. So for every, it's a couple $100 a gallon cost to protect supply lines for the US military.
Wow.
So you can imagine when they reduce fuel consumption by doing something as novel as what we developed, it's a big deal.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah,
wow.
So that was what Rev Technologies was focused on for about 5 years. And then natural gas prices just tanked in early 2012, and they've never come back. Making natural gas fleet vehicles made better economic sense than electric vehicles at that time. And so that really precipitated a pivot for Rev Technologies.
And then you started another company. You left Rev Technologies.
Well, I founded Rev Technologies, so I couldn't leave it.
Yeah. So what did that mean?
That means
starting another company.
I wound it down, and I had 47 shareholders who I needed unanimous support to do so. Really, you could only do if you have a better plan. So the better plan was to found Mojo using the same connected vehicle software platform that we built at Rev. And so we did. And we founded Mojo. We raised several rounds of financing. Mojo has gone on to become one of the most successful connected car platforms in the world. It's in 9 countries, distributed by 7 wireless carriers, and we can connect any car to the internet, any car from 1996 to today. And the big play there was if we could make 100,000 cars electric, that would be amazing. But that's a huge ambition for a company like Rev. Whereas if we could connect millions of cars and save 5%, 10% fuel by gamifying the way they drive and creating a connected vehicle experience that's smarter and more economic, then we could save fuel across millions of cars. And so Mojo has been on a mission to do that ever since.
And they're now the fastest growing company in British Columbia and like number 8 in
I think they were number 2 in Canada in 2018 and number 1 in Canada in 2019. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Yeah, amazing. Yeah. That's crazy. So with all that, you get a little restless again, as if the half pipe's not high enough, or I don't know what.
Something like that.
Something like that. And you start dreaming of another company, and it becomes Damon. And I think you're the guy that you started with, Dom, is right, Dominique? And
Dom, yeah.
So I saw in an interview, he said you were thinking about helmets in the beginning because you were thinking about safety, motorcycle safety. It's one of the big things. And you guys decided, well, probably actually starts with a motorcycle. Maybe we should build one of those. That sounds like a big stretch.
Yeah, it's well, it goes back to Scully. In the summer of 2016, I took a little hiatus. I went out to Jakarta for my best friend's wedding, which I thought Jakarta and Baldy were like the same thing. Turns out Jakarta is a city of 36 million people on motorcycles every day, so it's not at all the same thing. And sure, thank you very much. Got a UPS order here. Probably not for me. It's never for me. Yeah, I came back seeing all of the chaos of millions of motorcycles swarming around cars and through intersections and whatnot, and started to think that safety was, a pretty paramount problem for motorcycling. And I was on my Ducati at the time quite a lot, also just getting sick of being cut off like 4 times per ride. Pretty average, honestly. And I thought if I could just see behind me. So this was the month that Scully was supposed to launch, but it was actually the month that they cratered. And so I contacted the founders of Scully, got myself a Scully prototype. I said, I could probably reboot this company and make it a success. After using the Scully helmet for a couple of months, I really concluded that the use case of solving safety from within the helmet wasn't right. The weight, the battery life, you can't depend on a safety system that craps out on you when the battery dies. The way it would shear off in an accident, a whole bunch of reasons why the form factor of a helmet wasn't the right way to solve safety on a motorcycle. And of course, collision warning systems being what they are, incredibly effective at keeping cars from bumping into each other. I thought, why don't we have that on motorbikes? And so I spent the next almost a year with Dom talking about all the ways to do it. And we concluded that ultimately we were going to have to reinvent the motorcycle at some point. Maybe we could commercialize collision warning systems by themselves as a stepping stone measure before we dive deeper into the motorbike. But the more we did, the more we built these prototypes on these motorbikes and rode with them, the more we saw that we were going to have an integration problem. This is like it's like the difference between fighting over your printer driver for your old Microsoft laptop versus getting a Mac and it all just works perfectly. It's that hardware software integration being fully baked to belong with one another that makes a huge difference. And when it comes to safety and the rider experience and making things,
your video dropped out.
Yeah, sorry, and making things unintrusive and incredibly succinct in order to not increase distraction on a motorbike. You just can't jam technology into a bike, in an aftermarket sense and expect it to work well. So we really realized you have to reinvent the whole bike. And then if you're reinventing the whole bike, do you make it gas or do you make it electric? And I think we have the obvious answer on that now.
So that must have been, you must have done some pretty deep swallowing to say, woo, we're going to step all the way up to building a motorcycle, which I think
we were
Derek
building
said,
SUVs and pickup trucks a while back already. So,
but didn't one of your team, like Derek, say building a motorcycle is actually, you'd think it'd be easier, but it's actually harder than an electric car because of size and weight constraints?
It's both easier and harder. It's a lot easier because crash testing a car the size of your supply chain,
Mm-hmm.
all of the things that go into making a car, the amount of automation you need.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, dollar-wise, it's $1 billion to build a car company at bare minimum, whereas it's 50 million to build a motorcycle company. You don't need miles of automated robots building motorbikes the way you do with cars.
I see.
So, those kinds of capital investments, if your system is down for a day, you're losing millions of dollars a day. Whereas with motorcycles, it's people. A handful of people can assemble a bike in a few hours. From an engineering standpoint, to pack in the power, the density of energy that you need to have the kinds of performance, range, and utility that a motorcyclist expects from a gas motorcycle, that bar from an engineering design standpoint has never been achieved until now.
I see.
And so that's really, really hard. I mean, you just don't have 2,000, 3,000 pounds of space to put in a battery that's going to take this vehicle the range you need, like you do in a car. Whereas, on a motorcycle, we've got to condense 200 miles into 250 pounds worth of space. And that's, that's about that much space.
Yeah.
From here to there, and from here to there, you need a couple hundred miles worth of energy. And that's really challenging.
Yeah. So to accomplish that, you ended up hiring Derek from Alta after they tragically went down. He's highly respected for powertrains. Is he your powertrain, power density guy?
He sure is.
Yeah,
he's extraordinary.
Yeah.
And he's been at this for a long time. And he's literally a purebred racer on both sides of his family, going back 3 generations. They've all raced one form of racing or another: motocross, flat track, street. Yeah.
Yeah, quite amazing. So how did you get, you seem quite obsessed with the number 200. It's written on your bikes. You guys mentioned a lot. 200 miles an hour. I go breathless when I hear that. 200 miles of range and 200 horsepower. It's like, holy crap.
It's easier to achieve than making a motorcycle safe. And it's a big part of why, from 2017 to now to really 2 solid years of development, and we're not done yet. We spent just doing Copilot, just building the collision warning technology, which is a comprehensive system of sensor fusion, cameras, radars, microphones, infrared, humidity sensors, force sensors, all of this interacting in a way with an AI on board the bike to interpret your behavior, to interpret the surroundings that you and the motorcycle are facing in terms of traffic, conditions on the road, wet, dry, sunny or cloudy, how many lanes, what's the traffic doing, is the light about to change. All of that information is like autonomous vehicle contextual information that we use to interpret the threat or the potential threat that a rider might be facing. And if I'm looking over here and the threat's coming from over there, I need to experience that threat faster than I can react and see it. And that's why we deliver forward collision warnings through a patented vibration in the handlebars, which is really succinct, is really effective. It delivers the information through your palm to your brain faster than your eyes could interpret.
Yeah, so that was my first thought when I saw what you were doing. I thought, wow, that's like Tesla. There's front-facing radar and a rear-facing camera and
front-facing camera as well.
Front-facing camera. It's pretty amazing. No mirrors on that bike. No mirrors.
That's because I don't like mirrors. That's a prototype. We'll be shipping with mirrors, even though honestly, with the LEDs, the blind spot LEDs left and right, with a 6-inch LCD screen with 140-degree field of view, which is about 3 lanes, you really don't need mirrors anymore. And eventually, like in Europe, mirrors will be written out of the design homologation requirements in North America, as they have been in Europe. But until then, we'll be shipping with mirrors. But that's all challenging. But we had to know for ourselves we could make motorcycling safer before we could dive into the 200, which I'll talk about in a second. And so we've had LAPD, we've had the West Vancouver Police, the Vancouver Police, we've had 50 some odd motorcyclists in Vancouver. We've had general managers and top executives from almost every motorcycle company ride our prototype. We've had people from Cycle World and Forbes magazine ride it, and 100% of them find this system effective and trustworthy within about 10 to 15 minutes. And the camera on the front of the motorcycle is recording what they're seeing. out looking forward.
Yeah.
And so at the end, we can review the video and correlate it to their interview after the ride, where they say, I was going down this lane, and after about 15 minutes of riding, a car came out of an alley and just cut me off. And the motorcycle reacted as I was looking over my left shoulder, and I was able to stop in time. And then, of course, sure enough, there's our video footage showing what they described. And so we can correlate this quantitative test result with their qualitative experience of how a human interprets, their situation versus what the system on the bike recorded. And as the motorcyclist swerves or brakes to avoid that situation that the motorcyclist saw, we know, with 100% accuracy that the motorcycle correctly interpreted that situation that the rider, swerved for. And so when you see that, 100, 200 times, the system works. And so that's what's been really exciting about that. And when we could check that box, that holy shit, we can actually make motorcycling way safer and keep people out of fender benders, which on a motorbike means you're going to the ground. It was then that we started to turn our attention to the powertrain, and that was about a year ago. We brought on Derek to get started on that project.
I see.
And while getting the range and the density and all that kind of thing into a motorcycle is hard, you can brute force it. I mean, Lightning's brute forced it. You can get big fat motor off the shelf and a big battery and slam them together, and you can jam a bunch of energy down a chain to a rear wheel, and you can get incredible performance. I mean, we're not claiming performance beyond what Lightning has already achieved. Although I think we'll surpass what Lightning has achieved, but it's been done before.
I see. So in terms of sort of mental overload for the pilot, I thought the best thing about what you're doing was the actual user interface that you present to the rider. So the haptic feedback in the handlebars, that's pretty clever. Talk about the display in the line of sight, yellow light, red light, the rim on top of the windscreen.
Well, let's try this here. Let me see. Can I flip my camera around? I don't know if I can. You guys can see, this is an Aprilia, so this is not the perfect example, but you can see the lip of the windscreen here. And you can see the display down there. The display's, I don't know, 3 inches. It's pretty tiny. Now, if that were 6 inches, but in the exact same location, which is what we have on the Damon bike, with this lighting up amber here, lighting up amber here for your blind spot warnings, and red in the middle as a double warning, in addition to the vibrating handlebars for a forward collision warning. Your line of sight is over top of this. It's about, the top of that pickup truck, maybe a little higher, depending on what kind of riding you're doing. And so this is down in your lower peripheral. You can't really see it unless you glance. When you're riding your motorbike, you don't see your speed at all times. You have to glance down to this display to see your speed or to see your tack. Very similarly, this is down in your lower line of sight, and it's there, and you see it when you need it. But it's a lot like a car. My blind spot LED lights on my side view mirrors of my car, they could be lighting up as I'm driving down the street. But if I don't glance because I want a lane change, it doesn't matter if it's lighting up. It's really all about intent, right? So when your intention is to lane change, you then notice these things. And without that intent, you don't notice these things.
What's the experience of having the rear-facing camera and having a display?
Encouraging. It's relaxing. When I have when I'm riding down the street on the Damon bike, and I intuitively have this awareness, because it's down in my lower peripheral, I can glance down. If I'm thinking about changing lanes, I just make a quick glance. Oh, there's a car right behind me, and there's a car to my left. And sure enough, that car to my left gets into my blind spot. The LED comes on. Then I just carry on. I know I can't make this lane change. What's not relaxing is doing this. Yeah. Which many of us do. Dom triple checks. I double check. I don't know very many people that don't double check. And why do we double check? It's because we're freaked out every time we take our eyes off the road ahead. So now I'm not taking my eyes off the road ahead, and I know there's a car there. I know there's a car there. I know it's clear on my right, and I can relax and make easier decisions. It really is. It brings down your anxiety as a rider and increases your performance.
Yeah. So Paul D is asking, how does the deep integration work? What are the different components that need to be connected together?
Oh boy, that is such a big question. I'm gonna put my Aprilia here in the picture again because I like it. Best pretty. Bike I've ever owned.
Oh, it's great. It's so great.
Such a good bike. And I have had Panigales. Oh boy, the deep integration. need more detail to answer that question. You know, it starts from a hardware perspective.
What about the operating system, the BlackBerry operating system you guys use?
Well, so the deep integration starts at the cell. You know, we have 21700 battery cells. These are high density lithium ion cells. And our software is collecting data. It's like an oscilloscope level data collection that can pull data from the cell level all the way to the entire system, to the force sensors in the handlebars and the seat, in order to interpret rider behavior. And all of that data, all of the camera data, the radar data, and the conditions around the bike are collected and stored in the cloud. And we build software algorithms that improve the bike's ability to detect a threat, so that periodically you're going to get a better bike with a software update over the air. They're all 4G connected, and will allow you to have a safer riding experience as a result of everybody else on a Damon bike, and vice versa. BlackBerry QNX is the leading operating system for collision warning systems in the world's cars. I think they just announced they cracked 150 million cars in the world that QNX operating system runs on. Yeah, they are the dominant leader in a fully self-healing onboard network. It's the kernel layer software that the application layers run on top of. So if you have Navtech, Nokia, you have GM OnStar, all these types of software systems, all of your head-end unit in your car, they all run on BlackBerry QNX. All the collision warning systems run on BlackBerry QNX, and our collision warning system, Copilot, does as well.
Interesting. So, and all that stuff, what happens when it goes down? You're just riding a regular motorcycle, or just? Oh, it doesn't go down often.
It doesn't go down. No, it cannot go down. And that's a big part of the work we're doing with BlackBerry QNX. You know, they, in collaboration with the leading safety standards companies and with the ISO, we are establishing a new level of fail-proof operational systems with the ISO 26262 standard. No motorcycle company has ever tried to comply with that standard like the car companies do, and we're doing the same. So we're making sure that this is automotive grade, tested, proven, and validated by outside parties before we ship the motorcycle. So it really cannot and will not go down. I
see. So talk about what you call shift technology, where the rider position gets to change, and why you did
that. So December 2018, we're looking at just a skeleton of the Damon bike. I mean, at the time, we thought we were going to build a powertrain inside a frame, and we're no longer doing that. So we can talk about that in a second. But we're looking at the skeleton of the Damon bike, just a set of forks and a swing arm and a hollow frame with the handlebars. And Dom is standing there and he's looking at this thing. He's like, "You think it'd be cool if we made the bike transform?" And it was literally like he spoke a different language, because I could not understand what he meant right then. And so we had this 45-minute long conversation. A couple of the other engineers came over who had been baking this idea together. And at the end of it, I thought, the last thing we need is to take on another project and make this more complicated. But you learn to trust your partners, right? At some point. And so I said, how long would it take to find out if this idea is good or bad, and how much would it cost? And he said, $20,000, a couple of months. And I'm like, oh, just to build a really rough prototype. And of course, it's a mechatronic system. It's not simple. And you have to be able to put hundreds of pounds on a single foot peg, for example, while that thing may be able to travel up and down, and you've got brake lines and all sorts of complexity. So I said, okay, do it. And a couple of months later, we had built it, and we crammed it onto a motorcycle and gave it a try. And that first moment I hit the button on the left handlebar, and I was going up and on ramp from the city speed to freeway speed. So moving from 30 to 60 miles an hour, I guess. I'm converting because I'm Canadian. The handlebars, they're like a commuter bike, like a monster, Ducati monster kind of position. My feet are low and my seat is low, and I pressed that button, and it lifted me up from the seat about 1.5 inches, and my body got carried down, my upper chest weight, as the handlebars slid down, and my feet brought up into a race position as you're accelerating. And it was like being merged with the motorbike. It was a super exciting moment. And I thought, oh, we got something good here. And
I'm going to try to show a photo to see if people can figure out what goes on, except I can't see what goes on there. So you're changing the windshield angle. You're changing. What's going on here?
So the foot pegs
moving?
the foot pegs are rising up about 3 inches, but not straight up. They're rising up from a lower, like I said, Ducati Monster position up into a much more of a tuck knee, aggressive superbike position. The handlebars are gliding down 4 inches. The windscreen is going from an upper angle that's going to push the wind up over your head if you're sitting upright into more of a swept back angle, so it will hit your helmet as you're tucked in. And the seat is moving about an inch, but it's also changing from a flat angle to a bit more of a steep sport bike angle. So it's pushing you into the gas tank, getting more of your upper body weight forward up over the front forks.
Do you get more range when you do that on the freeway?
I'd have to measure that to give you an honest answer, but I would expect so.
You would think with the wind resistance.
Wind turbulence is a really big deal on motorcycles. Yeah, motorcycles are actually terrible drag ratios compared to cars.
Yeah, actually, so I have a Zero Black Forest out in the driveway. It's been on loan for about a month, and I've loved riding it, electric and everything. And but I had a charge in San Francisco the other day and come home, and the expected range was like 65 miles. But when I actually got on the freeway and started doing 75 and 80 miles an hour in that upright position, it's like there was this giant sucking sound, and I got a little nervous.
I didn't know electricity could evaporate.
Yeah, I was doing that. I think it was dripping out on the freeway or something. I had a leak. So I took I slowed down, I took some back roads, and I got home with 2% charge. So, because I hadn't charged it all the way in San Francisco, I had, impatiently, I was on a level 2 charger, and I just, the minimum I could to get home, and it turns out freeways more than you think. So
well, it's a funny thing, like gas motorcycles, like this is a great bike. It's an awesome bike. And I know lots and lots of people. We've surveyed thousands of people. We've got big, long essays from 4,500 people, I think, today, who tell us about why they like motorcycles and what they don't like about them and everything. And we've exhausted this question. People want to ride sport bikes as their commuter vehicle. They want to look good on it. We all have this alter ego that we express when we get on a motorcycle. And it's kind of like stepping into your superhero mode. We like to put on our leathers and all that kind of thing.
You want to look badass.
We want to feel badass the same way the Harley guy with the tassels and the black leather vest wants to feel badass. It's all the same thing. But motorcycles are not designed to do the job of riding the way we ride. This is not designed for commuting. And a commuter bike is not designed to be on the highway, as you expressed. We need a motorcycle today that deals with the real world conditions we face when we ride a motorbike. That's heavy congestion. That's canyons and city riding and highway riding. That's, collapsing traffic on the freeway and then expanding again. And we need to be able to ride for a couple of hours, be comfortable, be safe. And when we hit those open roads that are really fun, we shouldn't have to go home and switch motorbikes to do that. And that's really what's at the genesis of reinventing the motorcycle for Damon.
I see. Fascinating. I was going to ask why you chose sport bike. Why not? In fact, we have a question in the chat. Are you going to do any other kinds of bikes?
Well, so eventually, and we're working really hard right now. We're doing a lot more design and development effort to design a system that will be extensible to multiple motorcycle models without having to redesign an engine every single time. So when you're Honda, you make a 150cc motor, and then you want to make a 300cc bike or a 500cc bike, you have to redesign everything. It's very complex. It's incredibly expensive. But with electric drive vehicles, you can govern things in software, and you can have one big motor that's governed down to accommodate different use cases or needs and power levels and experience levels of different riders, without having to buy multiple different size motors. You can buy one type of motor that you've designed and extend it across from 200 horsepower bikes to a 50 horsepower beginner bike. And there's a huge benefit there economically to build a multi-model motorcycle company. And so we're thinking a lot about how we design something today that will be extensible to future models over time.
By the way, if I look distracted, sometimes I'm looking away and reaching for my keyboard. It's because I'm reading the chat.
All right.
what kind of questions to ask you? So let's talk about those 200s for a minute.
Yeah.
On the range, you list 200-mile range, which is amazing. And it looks, just sleuthing a little bit on your website, I thought I saw that it could be 300 in the city and it's actually like 161, or it's 200 if you're going 60 miles an hour. If you're going 70 miles an hour, it's like 161, something like that.
It starts to drop. And that's exactly like you
sound.
experienced on your motorcycle. And it's there's this great blog, I think, of a guy who built this fiberglass super aerodynamic bubble around his Zero SRF, and he's been riding along with another guy. You probably read it. And you know, they're measuring how much more efficiency they can get out. And sure enough, you know, motorcycles are not very good in the wind. They're great on a track where you're changing speed all the time. But it's the height, exactly. And it's all that turbulence around the rider. I'm surprised to see in MotoGP that they're only now looking at you know, enclosing the rear wheel and reducing that wind turbulence under the bikes and things like that. And they're doing it because they need that extra gain. It makes a difference. And sure enough, you know, you take a Damon 70 miles an hour steadily, and you're not going to get the same kind of range. It's the inverse of the city versus highway compared to an electric car. An electric car is so much weight that start stopping is actually, you're getting all that regen. But on a motorcycle, it's the opposite.
Interesting. So in terms of charging, it has a level 2 charger, or you can plug it in overnight at your house. I've found with the Zero, that's the ultimate convenience. I never go to a gas station. It's just, you plug it into your house. If you're within range of whatever you're going to ride around town, there's no maintenance. It's just like, oh, it's life changing. You don't have to even shift.
I have an electric car, and I'm fully charged every single morning. And I'm not scrambling to go get gas on the way to work, and I'm late because I didn't want to fill it up on the way home last night. You know, none of that anymore. It's always charged.
And riding in the dirt, I'm actually liking not shifting. It's just one less thing, cognitive load and all that. But when I go past its range, then it's kind of a pain in the ass, because you have to find the level 2 charging thing, and you have to have an account with them, a card, and it has to be available and all that. And I think what you said was 3-hour charge, level 2 for a full charge, but most people don't run it all the way down. So less time
1.5 to 2 hours, depending. And then under 45 minutes to 80% at a DC 25 kilowatt rapid charging station.
Can you describe that? Because I don't really understand what those are. The level 2, I understand because I had to figure it out for the Zero.
So there's level 3 charging stations throughout Canada, the US, and Europe. There's a standard worldwide called Chatamo, and it's a DC charging standard. The hose is a lot more fat, and you can push a lot more power into the bike in a much smaller time. It's a lot like a Tesla supercharger, but it's an open standard that all the automakers comply to. And there's quite a few of them. I mean, they're not in every small town yet, but that's a key thing why, and back to your question, why do we build a super sport bike first? We have to build a motorcycle that reestablishes the potential for motorcycles to go electric. And that means drastically exceeding the range of a gas tank on a comparable motorcycle like this one. That means the same performance, the same top speed. Nobody needs to go 200 miles an hour. But until an electric motorcycle can, then we're not going to displace gas motorcycles, because there's a lot to the bravado and the bragging rights that causes the horsepower race and the weight race and the range and the top speed race to continue. You know, if people didn't want 200 mile per hour motorbikes, these guys wouldn't make them. And so clearly people do. So we have to start by outperforming this in order to precipitate this change from gas motorcycles to electric. And if I go from Vancouver to Pemberton, my friends can ride to Pemberton and fill up and come back. But I need to go to Pemberton and back before I find a level 3 charging station. So that means my Damon bike alongside a gas bike has to be able to make the round trip. And if until it can do that, then, you know, if I ride alongside a gas motorcycle to a small town, they fill up, I'm stranded. We can't have that. We can't instill enough buyer confidence to displace gas motorcycles if that's a risk. So we have to eliminate that risk, and that means a 21 kilowatt hour battery. That means putting an extraordinary amount of effort into designing something that's lighter, that's really space efficient, very high density. We're pushing energy density higher than Tesla in our design, and the same kind of power and performance that you expect. And that means super sport bike.
Yeah, and the weight of the bike is around
about 450 pounds.
Yeah, wow.
We still got some more optimization to do, but we're, you know, that's a wet weight, because this is, other than cooling system fluid, this is not really a wet bike like we think about gas bikes.
Well, I live just a few miles from Tesla's headquarters, which is, by the way, out in a field of horses. And And there's Teslas all over this place. They just seem to be the common car. And level 3 charging stations are everywhere around here too. It's harder to find a level 2 one than a level 3. So you have a connector? Yeah, the level 3s are everywhere. So you have a connector on the bike for level 3. You can charge
DC integrated.
I see. Yeah. Well, that's
integrated.
Cool.
That's key. So you'll be able to just pop into any level 3 and get a quick top up. You know, if you're going in with 25%, or 30, 40%, whatever it is, it's going to take you 20, 30 minutes.
Yeah, that's nice. Yeah, we're getting there. And then the level 2.
We're getting there.
Yeah, the level 2 on the Zero is taking me a little longer than I wanted.
It's a small charger.
So Rudy ADV, David Rudolph, is asking about your direct-to-consumer strategy, or you don't have dealers, you're like Tesla, you're going to sell direct?
Correct. Now we can sign on, and we've been in discussions with quite a few dealers to be authorized service centers. I mean, if you look at the business model of a dealership, 80% of the revenue is made in the service bay, but only about 20% of the floor space is service. 80% is sales floor, but there's really no money there. The money's in warranties and service. So, you know, the business model of a dealer to be a service center for Damon makes a lot of sense. I know there's not as much maintenance on a motorcycle that's electric as there will be gas, but people drop bikes. People, you know, there's sensors to calibrate perhaps now and then. If you've dropped your bike a bunch of times, you know, there's going to be warranty repairs here and there as things go on. There's, you know, things happen. People get into accidents, need bikes rebuilt. So there will be service centers for that purpose in you know, major cities around Canada and the US. But as far as getting your bike, we'll ship it directly to your front door.
So we have more of a comment here than a couple of comments than a question. Mike ESP41 says, after I got past the eye candy, I loved how the bike did not look like an e-bike. It had a classic sport bike look, and when informed of the specs around awareness and distance, was super impressed. I've been riding for 43 years, the same guy. Well, I've been riding for 43 years, so I appreciate anything that can help my riding situation awareness. So that brings up the question of, I think I've heard you say in other interviews that your target customers are millennials.
Well, yes. I mean, that's the world's target customer today. The millennial is a pretty powerful group. I'm right on the cusp of millennial and Gen X, if you will. Gen X was a very small group of people compared to the boomer category, and now the millennials, which dwarf both of the previous generations combined in number of people and in purchasing power. I think we all think of millennials as 20-year-olds running around getting college degrees and stuff, but they're, you know, upwards of 40 now, and they're a quarter of the world population, and in parts of the world they're half of the world population of their country's population. You know, so they're the ones running the show, and even though, you know, Gen X and boomers are a lot easier to appeal to for motorbikes, you know, they don't worry as much about safety. We love kayaking. We grew up riding our bicycles in the streets. Millennials grew up doing this, staying safe in the home, or being in an SUV with 7 airbags around them and 3-point harnesses at birth. You know, so their expectations for safety, their expectations for technology to make their life better is extremely high. And I think motorcycles on the whole have really lost product market fit. You know, the market is not Gen X and baby boomers anymore, as much as we may not want to hear that. The market is millennials. They're buying a quarter of the world's cars this year. And so if you don't make a product for millennials, you don't have a future. And I think that's an important distinction, and why we've thought a lot about designing something that appeals to the future of motorcyclists.
And you made a comment somewhere in some interview that millennials have accounted for like 1/3 of all used motor, or 3x. Something about used motorcycle sales. I don't remember the stat. What was it?
Yeah. Used motorcycle. So motorcycle sales in the United States, people think motorcycle sales are declining. What's happening is Harley sales are declining, and they've declined about 50% in the last 10 years. And Harley had about 50% of the U.S. market. So when Harley declines, it looks like the whole market's shrinking. Smaller motorcycle sales have been going up steadily 7% year over year, as the motorcycle companies try to appeal to millennials who they falsely think just want smaller, cheaper, lower power motorcycles. And that's not true, but that's what the motorcycle companies can do unless they think about reinventing motorcycling, which is really hard for them to do. So conversely, we've been designing something that we think does have product market fit with millennials, and that's back to focusing on safety, focusing on a smaller carbon footprint, and focusing on technology integration to make their lives better. And in the absence of something like Damon, what millennials have been buying is low-cost used motorcycles in the market, which have nearly tripled in the last 15 years. So do millennials want motorcycles? If the answer was no, they wouldn't be buying all these used bikes.
Mm-hmm. All right. You've also said your potential customers are Tesla customers.
Yeah. So today we have several hundred orders. We're growing about 100 a month, which is rather astronomical. And over half of them are millennials, which is really interesting. Quite a few people are Tesla enthusiasts or they're Tesla owners. They also are often Ducati owners and or Ducati enthusiasts. So
I didn't know that.
These are people who appreciate, fine products, but they also think about their carbon footprint. They like technology. They're over half of them are between the ages of 24 and 44 years old, which is skewing about a generation and a half younger than the average motorcycle buyer outside of Damon, which is amazing. So I think we've kind of found that crossover point to really bring this young demographic into the sport, but not purely for sport reasons. We actually really want to change the way people commute. And I think that in another 10 years or so, Damon will have precipitated part of that change, as will have COVID. The UK just said they want to eliminate gas car usage by 2032. The mayor of Paris just got reelected. Yeah. She's wiping out 80% of street parking and wants to make the city great for walking and bicycling. Major cities and countries in Europe see that motorcycling is a rather safe way to get around compared to jamming people onto a subway or getting on the bus. So there is this really interesting resurgence happening right now. And I think, when you combine that with zero emissions and safety technology, we have a very different future ahead of us in 10 or 15 years from a commuting perspective.
Yeah, that's pretty exciting, actually. I've been sort of surprised. I have an earth science background. I was in oil exploration for a while. Wow. We just couldn't find enough oil. I was involved in the big Canadian gas field that was discovered.
Wow, really?
Yeah, with Canadian Hunter. It was an independent company. So, I just thought vehicles are going to get a lot smaller, and motorcyclists, are going to take over the road, and bicyclists and so on. And they have in a lot of Europe's capitals, especially where there's a lot of population density and the roads are small and so on, and Denmark and so on. They've continually provided more for pedestrians and bicyclists. But our vehicles have gotten bigger here in the United States. I mean, the trucks are huge. And the
miles per gallon has basically been a flat line.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think really big changes, Titanic size changes, kind of using the Titanic can't turn around analogy here. Really big societal changes need massive disruption that is out of any one person's or any organization's hands, out of government's hands, out of billionaires' hands. And really that comes in the form of existential threats, as odd as that may seem. And without these kinds of rebirths, if you will, things just stay as they are. It's just too hard to get too many interest groups, too many parties, too many decision makers together to affect any change. I mean, the climate agreements, the Paris Accord, we've been trying for decades to make these standards of emissions reductions and fuel consumption reductions and improvements in lead standards, and we're barely crawling towards these goals, often surpassing them without ever achieving them and having to reset new goals. And so now COVID's, for better or for worse, forcing some of that change to occur.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
So Mike and Kim Botan asked, what does Jay think of airbag tech for motorcycles? Will Damon consider airbags like Honda's?
Yeah. Well, I asked myself, a couple of things. I'll rewind for a sec here. I'll sort of dumb down safety technology on motorcycles into two categories. We have reactive systems and we have proactive systems. Another way of putting it is we have systems that protect the driver as much as possible, or the rider, and we have systems that protect the whole vehicle, the whole situation. Damon is really for the latter, right? I'd rather keep you out of harm's way altogether. Two vehicles not colliding than having them collide and then trying to reduce damage to the rider. We have airbag suits, which are pretty effective. We have airbag vests, airbag jackets now, thanks to Dainese and some other companies that are going to protect you from, reducing the damage to you in the event that you do fall off your motorcycle. But I'd way rather work on keeping the motorcycle and the car from colliding in the first place. The data shows that over about 2/3 of all motorcycle accidents happen in intersections, and about 3/4 of the accidents are caused by the driver. And it's always a T-bone, being hit from the front or being hit from behind at or near the intersection. And in many cases, the drivers are interviewed saying, I just didn't see them. And then about half of all motorcycle accidents show that riders took no evasive action before the accident occurred, meaning they may have seen it, but they didn't have enough time, enough of a bubble of space around them to pull that brake. So if you have a reactive system like anti-lock brakes or traction control, but you don't have time to pull the brake, then what good are they? And so, when you look at collision warning technology, and in our case, we're moving towards collision prediction, it's about time. The more time you can give the rider, the more warning, the more awareness, the more likely you're going to prevent that accident from occurring altogether. And I worked for Honda. I've seen the airbag systems. I've ridden with them. They have not deployed on me, thankfully. But I wonder why they've not been put into other motorcycles, other than maybe space and weight, which is enough of a challenge by itself. But yeah, I question it.
So Kawasaki asks, I don't know how you pronounce it, Kawasaki, and I'm really sorry, but I really like that pronunciation. Rhymes with wacky. Anyway, are you planning to build these motorcycles in Canada, or will they be built overseas with Canadian design, which is pretty much how everyone else does it these days?
Oh, I'm really thankful for that question. No, we're building them in Canada.
Right there in
Designed, developed, manufactured, and shipped from Canada. In
Vancouver?
TBD. The first couple hundred units, at least, right in our office downtown Vancouver, and we're looking at other locations for various economic and people reasons to create high tech jobs and whatnot. Yeah, no, we're doing it in Canada. The battery pack, the final assembly, all of that.
Yeah. Okay. So this has been extremely fascinating. Do you have any questions for me? Something interesting to say that I didn't ask about?
Well, we didn't talk about vehicle to home technology.
Oh yeah, let's talk about that, because when that first came out, I thought, oh, it sounds kind of gimmicky, and somebody wrote one of the comments in TechCrunch is that's really gimmicky. And then I was talking to somebody on the phone earlier today, and they said, no, I'm out here in Vermont. My power goes out 3 times a year, and that sounds like really cool. I want that. So yeah, talk about that.
Well, this goes back to a little bit back to Rev Technologies. My first tech company, where we were using these SUVs and pickups that we were developing to back up the entire military bases. We're even feeding energy back into the Midwest ISO in partnership with Chrysler and Next Energy in Detroit back in 2011. And we've shown that we could synchronize the energy in such a way that could make the vehicle owner about $300 per month. And this has to do with 2 kinds of power. Is this lawnmower really distracting?
No.
Okay. With 2 kinds of power supplies in the world. You have ancillary power providers, which top up supply and demand changes on the grid throughout the day. And you have the big, power producers like hydro dams and coal plants and whatnot. And in a micro case of your home, if you have a power outage, like we've seen some really bad ones in California recently, natural disasters, hurricanes, weather storms, trees that are down or snow, you're probably not going to roll out your motorcycle on that day. For many of us in North America, your primary vehicle is your car, and it's the one you probably don't want to sip power from to back up your home. Whereas the motorcycle, unfortunately for us riders who are obsessed, the motorcycle sits in the garage, and you've got 21 kilowatt hours there. If you cut your power down, like people do during outage events, you're going to run your house for 2.5-3 days off the bike. And it's no different than having a gas generator. It's the same hardware necessary to island the house and flip the power from grid supply to some kind of local power supply.
We have a question about how much you think that will cost.
Oh, well, it's power you've already paid for or produced from your solar panels. So it's not going to cost anything. you'll simply have the hardware available. So we've got a lot of the integrated systems on the bike.
I think they're asking about the home connection.
Oh, the home connection. So there's suppliers like Delta Box, Power Wall. There's a couple others that sell these charging systems, these external charging systems. They're the same that you use for an external battery bank or running up a solar system, and that will effectively island your house safely and securely from the power grid, so that you're not leaking power onto the grid or dealing with different interferences, and allowing that power to flow freely from the bike to the house. Today, I think they're about $3,000-4,000, and I'm sure they're going to come down. They're quite new today.
Okay.
Yeah.
So without distributors, only service centers, how does, like Tesla has showrooms, they have a couple around here. I could go drive a Tesla. How do I get to test drive one of these and see if it fits me and all that?
For the early few years of Tesla, they didn't have showrooms. And of course, they came on very slowly. We'll work with, we've talked to some of the Dainese stores. So we'll be rolling out test ride options at Dainese stores. There's 9 of them, I believe.
Yeah.
I think they're great. I think there's so much brand alignment between Damon and Dainese. We're about sport and fun and performance, but safety is job one. That's the first priority, is safety. And so you'll be able to go and take test rides at different kinds of pop-up shops. Get the gear you need. They'll lend you the helmet, lend you the leathers, put you on a Damon bike, go out for a test ride, come back, place your order right there on the mobile phone or in the Damon app.
I've been to the Dainese store in New York, downtown in Manhattan. It's beautiful, styling. It's like crazy.
Yeah, they're great. Really nice. We're good friends with the Dainese stores in Seattle and San Francisco, and Joe at the Las Vegas store. All really excited about what we're doing, and look forward to having that kind of novel traffic coming to the store to see Damon.
So last question, a big question. When?
End of next year. So barring any unfortunate COVID delays, end of 2021, we have the Hypersport Premier Founder Edition bikes that all sold out by the end of CES in January. Those ones will go up first. And then the
what does sold out mean? Does that mean there was a deposit placed on them to reserve them?
With a deposit. Yeah.
Claimed with a
Credit card
deposit.
deposits. Yeah.
And there's probably a waiting list in case somebody drops out or something?
We have not created a waiting list. No, what we did is we created the 2 new Hypersport Premier options that are not that are not one of a kind. These 25 one of a kind Founder Edition bikes will be, future classics.
And you've announced something like 16 million in orders, pre-orders already, something like that. How is that?
Yeah.
Is that based on the deposits people put down, or?
It's based on the price of the bike. Yeah, which varies from 25,000 for the HS or 40,000 for the Premier.
So you're kind of taking a page out of Elon's book about, reserving a site. Did you reserve a Cybertruck?
I did.
I see you have a truck out in your driveway.
Yeah.
You're going to replace it with a Cybertruck.
Definitely. Can't wait.
Yeah. Oh, that's really great. Well, thanks so much.
It's ugly, but it's great.
Yeah, it is ugly, but it is great. Yeah, from what I could tell. I haven't seen one in person, but they look pretty good. So thanks so much for your time. It's been a great interview. We'll talk to you later.
Thanks so much.
Okay. Bye-bye. I got to figure out how to end stream. Here we go.